Scuderia Ferrari has raced every year since Formula One began, but few seasons have proved quite as challenging, competitive and controversial as 2010's. For the team, its partners and many fans and followers, the Scuderia's 61st campaign was an exhilarating ride from delight to despair and back again. After a blistering start in Bahrain for drivers Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa and podium positions elsewhere, Ferrari's early season promise deserted them. But a memorable 1-2 finish at Monza marked the beginning of a remarkable resurgence and a string of wins for Fernando Alonso, who started the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi as leader of the Drivers' Championship. This being Formula One, the reversal in Ferrari's fortunes and the season's events as a whole were set against an ongoing story of technological innovation and development. In 2013, new rules will require that fuel efficiency is doubled within 5 years, using fewer and smaller engines, making the team's relationships with their technological partners more important than ever before. This program looks at just one of them, the oldest in Formula One, as both partners come to terms with the changes introduced in 2010 and the challenges they face together in the future. As well as introducing a new fuel specification for the 2010 season, Formula One's governing body decreed that cars could no longer be refueled during races, requiring teams like Ferrari to redesign their cars and rethink their race strategies. Shell, Ferrari's long-term technological partner, would also have to revise its approach to produce fuel and lubricants that delivered just as much power, but even greater efficiency. The drivers had their own concerns. What effect would bigger fuel tanks and a longer wheelbase have on the handling of their cars? Winter testing hours were limited, and the first Grand Prix of the season in Bahrain was fast approaching. In anticipation of the new regulations, Formula One's fuel formulators had begun their painstaking work several months previously. But before they could burn the midnight oil, they first had to find the right one.
The art of fuel formulation is getting the best power and the best efficiency. So we've worked very, very hard to understand that all the chemical elements that go into a fuel to make sure that we select the right one. So this is where we take lots and lots of different refinery streams from around the world, mix them together to make the fuel for the one car. We have to understand the way that the compounds react, how quickly they burn. The engine is doing 18,000 RPM, so we're looking for compounds that burn really quickly and give it the best in efficiency.
More than 200 individual components had to be modelled and analysed. But in 2010, power and efficiency were not going to be the only considerations.
It's normally when you refuel 2 or 3 times during the race, you're refueling with cool fuel. So without that cooling effect, something that a lot of people may not realise is that the fuel is actually going to get a lot hotter inside the car. One of the ways to get around this is actually in the fuel formulation itself. We're designing the fuel to be able to deal with these hotter temperatures and not to vaporise in the fuel tank. You can get vapour lock issues. Or the other problem is you can get air bubbles in the fuel. This can cause what's called cavitation. And if you got the most extreme circumstances, the fueling system would be damaged beyond repair.
Then there were 2 further factors, the new fuel's weight and volume.
You're talking 20% of the weight of the car at the start is made up of fuel, so we've put a lot of effort into the fuels for this season to give them the best fuel efficiency on a weight basis. Conversely, if you've got a tank on the car that's a little bit small, you want the good fuel performance on a volume basis, so we're having to cover both angles.
We had all these challenges, and I have to say the initial reaction was probably, oh God.
We've got the density down as low as we can. As I said to Alessandro before, the last one looks the best.
Mike Evans' first batch of candidate fuels for the 2010 season is being tested in Maranello.
You can see from our measurements the fuel economy that's predicted is exactly what we're seeing, so that should give us a good advantage, I guess.
The cooperation between team and technological partner is close and continuous, not least in 2010 when both are climbing a steep learning curve.
The emphasis used to be on power, power, power. Now fuel economy is coming into it and we're all learning.
When you develop a fuel and an oil, you cannot just take a good fuel, put on an engine and expect it works. Engine and fuel and lubricant have to be developed together.
After exhaustive modelling at Thornton, the most promising formulations are made up in small batches and tested for performance and reliability during long-run tests on static engines at Maranello. It's a measured and methodical approach.
Because you have to understand what you're doing. Just throwing ideas is not good enough. We need to do the genuine research work to understand what happens in an engine working at ridiculously high loads and speeds. Thornton's research environment is invaluable to us because we have a continuous development programme of fuels and oils which needs bespoke resource and needs bespoke people and also needs to be very reactive because we need to keep an advantage over the competition.
Evans and his colleagues are regular visitors to Maranello, where their every effort and each new development is rigorously scrutinised, then fast-tracked or sidelined. The demand for improvement is incessant.
Yeah, we normally apply a lot of pressure, but they know us, so they accept this pressure because they are part of the team, they are part of the game.
Dave is the team leader. He's English. He knows how to ring me up and challenge me and say, I want this fuel or I'd like this fuel now, and he's always pushing for development. Alessandro Rossetti looks after the combustion side of the engine, combustion efficiency. He gives you a really good insight into how the fuels are performing. So it's a rewarding part of the job is coming over here and chatting with the guys.
Formulation and testing complete, the new race fuel for the first 4 races is now subject to ratification by Formula One's governing body, the FIA.
When we design the fuel and we send it off for approval, we clearly want to be as close to the limits as possible. So if we get 1 or 2 error messages telling us we're right on the limit, that's a good thing. We want it to come back telling us we're right on the edge of the formulation space, because otherwise we've over-engineered it and not really exploited all the opportunities.
When approval is granted, production of the fuel finally begins in large quantities. 1 consignment will be dispatched to clear customs in time for the first Grand Prix of the season, while another is prepared for the more imminent challenge, Formula One testing in Spain. At Jerez, car and fuel come together on one of the few remaining occasions before the Formula One Championship begins. Speed is still king, but the significance of fuel efficiency is not lost on the drivers.
Let's say your engine uses a bit less fuel than another engine. Maybe you can do the whole race with 10 or 15 kilos less fuel than another car, which is lap time.
While many factors lie beyond their control, fuel consumption is to some extent in the hands of the drivers.
So we have some mix on the engine.
All of the drivers on their steering wheel, they'll have a button which enables them to make the engine run more lean or more rich. And really what that's doing is affecting the ratio of fuel and air inside the engine. By changing that ratio, you can use less fuel, but you will ultimately have less power.
We have the torque map, which is raining or drying. You have different maps. So we have the revs. We have so many things on the steering wheel, which we are working a lot also when we are driving.
This season, drivers may also be forced to adopt 1 or 2 other options at their disposal.
We've been practicing some lift-off before the corners, braking a little bit earlier. Can make 2 tenths slower the time lap, but around 2 or 3% fuel saving.
When you have a heavy car, the way you go into a high-speed corner, you can go in a different way, which you use a little bit less the throttle, take it away the gas a little bit earlier, but braking much later. So you have many things you can do to save a little bit more fuel.
Because each circuit is different, ensuring that drivers have enough fuel to finish but carry the minimum weight across the line presents a major challenge for the race engineers.
Monaco itself is a very, very high downforce circuit. That means basically that you use more fuel. If you look at Monza, Monza is a very low downforce circuit, so you tune the car to have a very low drag level.
Whichever circuit they're racing on, drivers will have a very heavy car to start the race and a lighter one to finish. Ultimately, the aim will be the same, to drive at the very limit, wherever that limit may be.
You're talking about completely two different cars to drive, but you are in the limit in both directions, you know. You need to be in the limit, otherwise you're losing time.
I think we are ready. We have some innovative products from Shell that we've been testing all winter, and I think we found the right compromise. We have to be very optimistic.
After 9 months of work, push is coming to shove. 3 weeks later, all the effort proves worthwhile. There is more cause for celebration ahead of the Australian Grand Prix, the 450th race of the two partners' long-standing technological collaboration.
Shell with Ferrari together now since the beginning have had 12 Drivers' Championships and 10 Constructors' Championships, and it's been a tremendous partnership. And obviously since '96, the partnership has been probably the most successful period for any one team in motorsport.
The partnership began over 80 years ago when Enzo Ferrari founded the Scuderia Ferrari in Modena, originally as the racing team for Alfa Romeo.
This picture is the beginning of a story. This is 1929, the beginning of the Scuderia Ferrari. This was the racing team. You see the facility, and you see in front of the facility the petrol station of Shell.
In 1943, Ferrari moved his operation down the road to Maranello, where the first road cars to bear his name were built 4 years later. The Scuderia remains the only team to have raced in Formula One continuously since its inception in 1950.
My father was a very tough person, but was able to give to every person in Ferrari, from the last mechanic to the team manager to the general manager, the right motivation to push every day.
Apart from one relatively brief period, the partners have worked together since the Formula One Championship began and have won over a third of the races they've entered in all competitions.
My father was looking to a partner, and fuel and oil has always been a very important part of engine development. The materials you can use on the engine is strictly linked to the fuel you are using, to the oil you are using in your engine. So my father was convinced of this when he was team manager of Alfa Romeo in the 20s.
Shell was crucial in our victories, particularly in the last, let me say, 15 years, where the competition has been very tight, 1/10, 2/10. The work has been crucial to gain what was necessary to be competitive.
On a visit to the northwest of England between races, Fernando Alonso is about to learn how some of his competitive advantage is created and maintained. He's not the first VIP to be shown round at Thornton, but he knows better than anyone what the developments produced in the lab can deliver on the track.
Andy's going to explain to you a little bit about the fuel development, how we do it.
I think from a driver point of view, the relationship between your team and the partners are very important, because we have to be completely focused in the driving, but we know that behind us there is a very big effort from everybody, so that gives us the confidence, because we know that we are in good hands.
The fuel formulators have been under particular pressure this season, but for the developers of new lubricants too, the search for improvement is rigorous and relentless.
Lubricant isn't just a fluid that's thrown in afterwards. It's a component like a piston or a conrod or a camshaft.
Inside the engine, the lubricant forms a film to protect moving parts like the pistons, camshaft and crankshaft bearings, while keeping to an absolute minimum the losses of energy these areas may produce.
The art is, first of all, getting the performance as high as possible with just enough protection to get to the end of the race with a suitable margin for safety.
Fuel formulators have had more latitude in the design of their new products this year, but ultimately their parameters are fixed. The lubricant developers have no such constraints.
The lubricant side is slightly different because we don't actually have any rules, which is great news for Mark Wakeham. He's allowed to use all his experience, his know-how and his expertise.
Formula One cars use a system called a dry sump, which pumps oil around the engine via a separate oil tank. It's more efficient than the wet sump in the average road car, but it also causes engineers one major headache.
There's a lot of chaos going on inside the engine. The oil is thrown around, it picks up air. You want to lubricate with a liquid with the minimum amount of air in as possible, because you want to lubricate with a liquid, not a compressible, spongy material.
Through a combination of additives, engineers can speed up the removal of air bubbles. But they also need to make the oil's passage through the engine as easy as possible.
We're always trying to drive down the viscosity, the thickness of the oil, but not so far that you actually lose protection.
We want it to foam to get to parts of the engine so it's hard to reach. But if there's too much foam, then that stops the lubrication and you don't get your film, so it stops it doing its job.
Like the fuels, new lubricants are tested at Maranello before the best is blended in larger batches at Thornton. But that's not where the relationship ends.
We have the trackside team at every race. Ferrari value this very highly. We call it a blood test.
Every time you go out in your car, we get a sample like this from the garage, and it's always got a number of kilometres on it.
When an engine or a component wears, the metals it wears off end up in the oil, and by analysing that you can tell how fast it's wearing.
If we see something that looks abnormal, we tell Ferrari immediately.
They give us immediate feedback about what they think the problem is.
If you like, it's like an early warning system for what's going on inside your engine.
To be there is unique within that paddock, and that shows the trust, I think, between the two companies.
Shell analyze the oils during the weekend, and obviously it's nice to know what they are finding and what is the situation with our engine that we need to race on Sunday afternoon.
A month after Fernando Alonso's podium finish in Spain, and well into the European leg of the championship, his teammate himself returns home, even if he does end up a long way offshore and even further upstream. Today, it's Felipe Massa who gets an insight into the work of the team's technological partner and how their fuel gets from the rig to the road. His grandfather emigrated to South America from Italy, and he himself speaks Italian well, but Massa is a Brazilian and proud of it.
It's always fantastic to go home, the place you're born and the place you grow, and it's always nice to go home and to see how important is your country as well, how many important things we have, and how important it is also to the other countries as well.
The Fluminense is a vast floating oil platform the size of 4 football pitches. To many of its workers, Massa's brilliant driving in the 2008 championship, when he was denied the title by Lewis Hamilton on the final day, have made him a national hero.
And the draw has been done yesterday, and now we're handing over the prize, and we would like you to hand over the prize.
Okay.
Yeah?
His visit has been planned for 6 months, and it's a chance for Felipe to present safety awards to workers who often work in extreme environments.
First time I came here, and I think it's just amazing to see all the details, everything does here. I think this is just fantastic, and I think you learn and you enjoy a lot.
In recent races, the speed and reliability that marked his team's start to the season have proved elusive. After setting the early pace, it's the red cars that are now playing catch-up.
The feeling is always to improve, to make the evolutions as quick as possible, to have a competitive car in the next race.
Ferrari and their technological partners are under pressure, but developments are already in the pipeline. In the world of Formula One, nothing stands still for very long. As the events of Ferrari's dramatic season unfold, Mike Evans returns to Maranello. First to look back, then to move forward.
We're well into the season now and the fuels have behaved very well. We expected some issues with fuel tank temperatures, but those have not manifested themselves, so that's gone well. The overall efficiency of the fuel is very, very good, so we are getting good fuel consumption, so we are now looking at developing fuels for the latter part of the season.
2 batches of the fuels used in Bahrain have been made so far, but since then Mike and his team have been focusing on new formulations. The challenge now is to get them tested, approved and blended in larger quantities as soon as possible.
We've just recently tested these fuels S153 to 155, and obviously then we blended a larger quantity of 153 too. Towards the second half of the season, there are several challenging circuits coming along. We are mindful that probably somewhere like Singapore and Suzuka are very, very long races, so it'll stretch the cars, see how good their fuel efficiency is. We're hard at work developing products for those final races.
On the lubricant side too, the demand for improvement remains constant, even if the time available does not.
The level of response we have to achieve in Formula One is really very fast. As we always know, Ferrari really want to win their home race at Monza, so in addition to all the work that they've been doing in the areas that they can improve, they want to take everything they can, and that includes engine lubricant. And we have a new candidate engine lubricant which we've been testing here in the labs. The oil's gone out to Maranello for testing in the engine there. There's a power improvement that's significant and worth having. Those tests looks like they will just be completed in time. Because of the time difference, we all actually have to send the oil out in advance of knowing whether it is approved or not. But if it is approved, then it will go into the car and it'll be used in Monza.
The rewards for the team's hard work are swift and spectacular. 3 Grand Prix victories. So successful is Ferrari's comeback that Fernando Alonso needs only to finish second in the final race of the season to win the Drivers' Championship. But despite his best efforts in Abu Dhabi, the Spaniard can finish only 7th. And after a brilliantly fought campaign, misses out on his 3rd championship title by just 4 points. For all the disappointment of its finale, the 2010 season represents a spectacular return to form for Ferrari and a vivid illustration of its commitment, in tandem with its long-term partner, to unstinting technological innovation. With Formula One competition so tight, the slightest improvement to a car's aerodynamics or chassis can create a decisive advantage. The difference between winning and losing. But where fuels and lubricants are concerned, as this story in 2010 suggests, the drive to deliver performance benefits is no less intense.
I think looking at the end of the season, we do feel that we've made a significant contribution. It's one little brick in a great big wall of improvements that Ferrari have made, but they all add up together.
To develop a competitive engine, to have a reliable and powerful unit, you need to develop, together with a partner, lubricants and fuel that fits perfectly your engine. And for this, you need a long-term partnership. The advantage for Ferrari to have such a long-term technical partner is that a really important thing for us.
For the suppliers of fuel, lubricants and their technologies, the use of biocomponents will be a more prominent feature of the Formula One landscape. For them, the challenges ahead present the chance to reassess their priorities, regroup and revitalise their relationships with the sport, their teams and their customers.
The main reason we work with the Ferrari Formula One team, it's not about sponsorship, it's not about putting the peton on the car, it's for us to be able to use Formula One to demonstrate new technology, to test out new innovation and to ultimately make sure our customers really are benefiting from the latest technological advancements.
My response to the technical regulations will eventually be translated into things that we can use on the road. You may see it first in Formula One in better power, but in the road car you're looking for better fuel economy, better mileage from your fuel and lower CO2 emissions.